And now for Borg Bites.
Welcome to the first episode of Borg Bites, where I take some highlights from largely Swedenborgian podcasts, but also some others that I feel kind of emulate that same way of thinking. And I'm just chuckling right now because I wanted to start with the biggest, the most successful, the granddaddy of Swedenborgian podcasts, Off the Left Eye. And so, yeah, I looked up, when did they start? And it was 15 years ago. I'm going to share my screen here. All right, so here's Off the Left Eye on YouTube. And their very first episode, 15 years ago, starts off talking about wading through all the ideas that are out there in the world, which is just how Crosshatched starts off. So that was really fun to see that Curtis Childs started very similar to how I did. And has come a long way in 15 years from stick figures. This is a great one to kick it off, so here we go.
You don't have to be a Christian to go to heaven.
What?
The way it works is that God is divine love for the whole human race. God is love for the whole human race. Jesus Christ is just the human manifestation of that divine love. The idea of Jesus and Christian doctrine, that sits in your intellect. But the life that Jesus asks you to live, the life of love toward the neighbor and do what's good and don't do what's evil, that lives in your will, in your heart. And it's the heart that makes us who we are. So somebody who does not have Christian doctrine in their head, but yet in their heart follows that life of love to others and love to God that Jesus is, they are more connected to the reality of Jesus Christ than someone who has Christian doctrine in their head, but in their heart is not living the life of love that Jesus prescribes. The heart is what makes you connect to God. Anyone living through their heart by whatever their religious teachings are can go to heaven, because heaven is just connection to God.
Thank you, Curtis Childs, for that introduction. It is such an amazing channel. I highly recommend it. But we've got some more for you. There is also Spiritual Sunshine out on the West Coast with Corey, who's worth checking out.
Christians have been undermined by the Paulian, I'll call it, idea that works don't matter. For those Christians out there who kind of doubt this idea, he said directly in multiple places in the gospel, why say, Lord, Lord, and not do what I've told you to do? In that day, I'll say I never knew you. Sounds like
Well, this is the common counter argument to salvation through faith alone.
Because if only Christians go to heaven, they're the only ones we really have to care about. But that's not what Jesus said, and he never said only Christians go to heaven.
That was Corey with Spiritual Sunshine, and we're going to wrap up Borg Bites with Del Rose from the Chicago Swedenborgian Library, who did a podcast and grabbed a couple of really cool clips.
How the Swedenborgian tradition has engaged understanding the Bible and why it is so very different, and I would argue very important, does not equal received scripture.
That's the Bible
as it has come to us.
Received scripture.
The Swedenborgian canon is much smaller than either the Old Testament canon or the New Testament. And those books that Swedenborg explicitly speaks about are all important because they retain the internal sense of the Lord. They have a message that goes beyond history and time to something that is transformative and something that is immediately accessible.
Okay, and just before I restart this one, note that New Jerusalem, or the Church of New Jerusalem, that was the former name of the Swedenborgian Church, which, is nowadays sometimes known as the New Church. Check it out.
God's image. The writings of the New Jerusalem are specifically that. They are the tools that take you from a world that worships a tyrannical God to to a world in which you understand that love, wisdom, and mercy are everything, but also freedom. And this freedom, I tried to make this argument that Swedenborg is the only real modern thinker who I think understands what freedom means. And freedom is not.
This is such a huge part of my thinking. So many ask, why do good things happen to bad people or bad things happen to good people? To me, it seems that we have to live in this world of apparent chaos for the sensation of freedom, for us to make our individual fingerprint-like algorithms of who we are. And sometimes I think of freedom or independence as a necessary illusion. I've considered that even if everything we are ever going to say or do has already happened in the space-time continuum, in some ways you could look at that and say, oh, it's predestined, but that's not necessarily true. We could simultaneously have free will with the universe still knowing what we would choose. If we're made in God's image, that means that we are like mini gods, where we make decisions and we have autonomy. And so this sensation of freedom is a critical element for us to create our identities, to have identity.
That they are interpreting history with the goal of coming up with a right belief, orthodoxy. Whereas in the Swedenborgian understanding, the Bible is, of course, a book of correspondence that completely enlivens the soul, but it can be found in other places. And this is why we are not so hung up on the idea that one has to be a professing Christian before you die. Or, we don't have that idea, because the love of God and understanding about who he is innately is not limited to the Bible alone or to the Christian tradition.
So that was the first episode of Borg Bites. So stand by for the next episode. And remember, you can be detached and still subscribe to Crosshatched.